Thank you everyone for coming. Today we'll be talking about, what are the key pillars for strategic planning for a business. I presume most people here are either in that spot of having an influence on which way a business goes or have their own business. So really we're going to talk about what are the key fundamentals that you need to consider when going into the planning process. What does the next 5-10 years look like? Where do we want to go? So without further ado, as mentioned, my name's Jeremy. I'm a principal in the business advisory division at William Buck. We're an accounting and advisory firm. We're nationwide. We have a stand just over there if you want to come check us out later. But really, we do more than just accounting and tax. We're a full service firm. As for me, I work in business advisory. So what that means is we, as the name suggests, we advise businesses on what best practices are. That can be from cash flow management, forecasts, planning, down to documenting a strategy. It's not so much an accounting thing, but our job is to know businesses and what is a good business and advise our clients on that to really make sure that everyone's getting the growth they're looking for, or at least achieving their goals they're setting out to do. Today, we'll be talking on a couple of things. The agenda that we have is really just, having a purpose equals performance. You could almost put a sporting analogy on it, but when we advise clients and when we review businesses, we're really looking at how aligned the people and the owners and all the stakeholders of a business in achieving a target. And that may be a goal, that may be a vision, a mission. So we'll look into that, and we've got some statistics around, what does good alignment and purpose equate to. From there, we'll touch a bit on what a mission and a vision statement are, because for me, I see them as two really important factors in developing a plan. To put a plan in place, you need to know where you're going and why you're going there. Without those two things, you're just going to get distracted by the new shiny thing that pops up. From there, we'll just touch on a bit of business planning and how to structure a business plan. And then we'll conclude there and take any questions that we may have. But first, to kick off, I'd just like to share this image. It's our business growth journey. And I guess as advisors, we see businesses from all walks of life. That may be the startup phase, where they're just getting started out and they may need initial funding, R&D, tax and structuring advice. From there, we have a lot of businesses which spend a lot of time in that growth phase. And from there, they go into the maturity and then potentially exit plan. So at each checkpoint along this journey, you really want to make sure you have a plan. And having a plan and having it in your head is one thing, but really sitting down and documenting that and getting the input of other people within the business is really important. If everyone's marching to the same beat of the drum, you're going to have a lot more uptake and ownership over achieving those goals. So really, and I'm going to flick to my page here because I can't see that far. But really, every good plan is going to start with having a really good purpose. Now, from what I hear and from what I see, at the moment, a lot of employers are having a lot of trouble in getting ownership and commitment out of their employees. And sometimes that may be that, they're just not invested in what they're looking at. So by having a purpose that's shared across an organization and one that, management, key stakeholders, owners really live and breathe and want for the business is really important. What a couple of studies have shown us is that 40% businesses with a clear purpose have a 40% higher level of retention compared to their competitors. What that shows is that by having that purpose documented and celebrated within an organization, people feel part of it. They're not just coming to work because it's their job, but they come in because they have a sense of purpose and they want to stick it out. And a job's a job and work's work. There's always going to be good times and bad, stressful and enjoyable. But having a commitment to an organization is really important for employee retention. Following that, 82% of employees with a strong sense of purpose are engaged at work. Again, it's about getting that commitment. It's not I'm doing a job or I'm manufacturing something because I'm just on the conveyor belt. It's knowing that what I'm doing in my job is going to have an impact on the end product, on the end purpose, the end customer. And knowing that every job has different roles and responsibilities. And you can't just take one person out or one role out. One role isn't more important than another. And everyone needs to work seamlessly to make sure that the company and organization can actually achieve its goals. It can fulfill their customer orders. It can grow in multiple ways. Further, 30% of businesses with a purpose-driven culture experience high levels of innovation. And this is really important for our industry. We want to make sure that we're at the cutting edge of what we're doing, and we always want to push the barrier. Without knowing where we're going, we might start innovating anything, and it might not be in our wheelhouse. And we've seen people expend time, financial resources, just going down the rabbit hole thinking that something's really going to be innovative and change, but then kind of forget why they're in business. And when they reflect on that, they go, well, let's stick to our knitting and how can we do what we're doing now and make it better, innovate that. Again, 30% purpose-driven businesses experience higher revenue growth, and that comes back to really being aligned at the core management of the business. If we know what we're doing, we know our limits, we know our boundaries, we know what we do well, and we celebrate that, and we promote that and market that, that's going to resonate in product, quality, marketing, and even just a sense of ownership and pride when people speak to people. Something like that is really important, especially at an event like this, where people are approaching you and they're seeing your stand and they're seeing your brand. They want to make sure that they're feeling that rapport. You can build a rapport with them and the ownership and commitment there. And lastly, and I think most importantly, customers are likely to conduct business with those people that align with their values. So it's understanding that, me personally, I like to deal with brands and businesses that I know have a bit of purpose. They care about what they do. For me, I really value quality. So I'm not going to go for a cheap option. I may look to spend a little bit more, but knowing that this quality is going to have a lot more longevity than another product that might be cheaper. So again, I think this is important to highlight because it's really coming back to before we start the business plan process, we need to reflect and think, okay, who are we? Where do we want to go? And how are we going to get there? Which conveniently leads us to where do we start? So there are several key items we need to understand about a business before we commence the business process. So what is our vision, mission, and purpose? We'll delve into these a little bit later, but really I think at the core, these are important. Sometimes we can get caught up in working in the business and forget why we're here. And it does depend on the size of your organization. If you're an SME, you may be wearing multiple hats and you may have a great idea that if I had 2 weeks and spent time on this, I reckon it'd be a game changer. But that 2 weeks is always 4 years away because there's just so much going on. Saw a laugh there, so I think we're critical. Following that, we then need to know what our drivers of our business are. So to say that we want to grow revenue by 10%, cool. How are we going to do that? Are we going to increase prices? Are we going to increase volume? Are we going to expand our network? Are we going to expand our geographical location? So we need to understand what are those drivers. From there, what are our goals? And these may be business goals, but also personal goals. We work with a lot of large private businesses. So the business and the personal part integrate really well. And that may be the owners looking to exit in 2 years' time. So, okay, that might be our strategy. How do we get ourselves business ready? Or we may be a new business. So we got to understand, okay, how can we finance the capital that we need to start this business? And that may be leveraging personal assets outside of things and also then protecting personal assets as well. So it's really, again, knowing where we want to go, how we're going to get there. And then really, if we've answered these 3 questions, do we have it documented? Because if we don't, it can change really quickly. And what we think we want to do today and who we want to be in the future, right now, 3 months down the track, we might not have something to rely back on. So it's about documenting it, having people contribute to that process, and then also making sure that we have people holding us accountable to achieving our targets and how we're going to get there. A really good anecdote around this is, I'll say 5 years now, we had a session at Melbourne Football Club. I'm a Carlton supporter, so I just wasn't really too flashed on going out there. But I think what it showed was and I was talking about things like this, but from a sporting perspective, but it was going, okay, we want to be a premiership winning football club. How are we going to do that? What are our values as a football club? What's our mission? How are we going to do that? And they already had that in place, but I think when the new management came through, it was just their values, they had on a poster, fell onto the floor. No one was really committed to the ultimate goal. And I think once they started to invest time into the culture and the alignment of people and making sure that everyone felt a sense of importance in what they were doing to achieving that, the club turned around and they won a premiership or 2, I think. Not too sure. But out of that as well, one of the key things that resonated with me was their opinion was one of the most important people in their organisation never set foot on a football field. And it was their receptionist. It was the person that greets any visitor to the Melbourne Football Club. That's the first point of contact. The first person they're seeing is someone that's just sitting at the counter introducing people. And it's about making sure that person there is aligned to the culture of the club, to the culture of the organisation, because at every point we need to represent who we are and how we do it and make sure that everyone's valued. So vision and mission, I love these two words. And they are basically the mission and the vision of a business are two unique factors of building a business strategy. And it's really, what do we aspire to be and how will we get there? So with that vision, it's really going, okay, what is our business and why are we here? What's the change that we want to make in the world? Why is the reason we got into business or why we're staying in it? It shouldn't change from year to year and it should be a constant guide for a business. One of our clients, they're an online retailer of automotive parts. And really their vision, without really thinking about it, was, we're just there, we want to make profit. But really after diving deep in with them, their vision was to provide affordable and quality automotive parts to the Australian market. And it was also, their mission was to be the #1 seller of online retail automotive parts. So they're very high level statements, and they can be, and they should be. They shouldn't be low hanging fruit. By articulating that, it almost sets the criteria for our decision making. To be the #1 online retailer of automotive parts, it then filters down into your marketing strategy, your financial things, your innovation and SEO optimization. If we could be the #1 seller and retail store, but if we're not investing in getting people to our site and getting that traffic, how are we actually going to achieve our mission? So as you can start to see, these two high-level statements can start to filter out in the decisions that we make, where we spend our money, where do we invest in, and where do we innovate. On the mission as well, what is the business looking to achieve now? And, your mission may be a 5-year plan. And it may be, Nike in the late 80s, Reebok had the basketball shoe market. And Nike's mission was to crush Reebok. So they basically did everything they could to make sure that they were able to take the sneaker market off Reebok, and they successfully did that with Jordan brand and signing Michael Jordan. But that was their mission, and everyone was laser focused at that. It needs to be defined, measurable, accomplishable, and direct as well. So having an airy-fairy mission, you might get lost in the words. So being really direct with where do we want to be in 5 years' time? And as I mentioned, it sets the course for the business to ultimately achieve its vision. So once we have the vision and mission in place, we've got to question, do they inform strategy? Are they going to really guide us to where we want to be? Do they provide a framework for effective decision making? Do they build alignment and collaboration amongst people in the business? And that's a really important one there, because the people aren't just our employees. They're our legal counsel, our accountants, they're our customers, they're our suppliers. They're people that we leverage on to make sure that we can fulfill our mission and vision. If we're not considering how we're approaching the different stakeholders, we're going to fall short in really achieving our mission. And ultimately, do they inform the experience of customers and employees, which is a flow on from the above, but having the customer experience at the forefront as well is going to be really important for recurring revenue, referring customers, and really just the overall culture perception of the brand. So once we have clarity on our vision and mission, we can then develop a strategy to achieve our business goals. So this is where we get into the more fun part. What goes into a business plan? Now this picture here, AI has made it look pretty, but it was something that on a 2-day workshop, I kind of drew out with a client because we were at loggerheads. We couldn't really articulate what the difference was between working in the business and working on the business, really trying to understand, which parts of the business do we need to invest in to get the fruits of our labor. And really, I think the tree example was a great example for that. So we got our system support down the bottom, and these are going to be our suppliers, our warehouse staff, financing, freight, internal management, advisors. The client that we were dealing with was only focusing on the top half, which is the branch and the leaves, which was online presence, innovation, retail experience, brand stock. But ultimately, they were just, let's make revenue. We've got to make more profit. And they were focusing too much on there and really leaving behind the backbone structure. So the business plan, and when putting a business plan together, you'd need to consider the foundational pillars of the business, which ultimately are people, customers, and growth. Around that, you need to understand what's your support system. What's our relationship with suppliers? Do we have a really good relationship? Can we negotiate terms? Are they there when we need us? Our internal management, do we have managers that are aligned to what we're trying to achieve here? We're paying them a good amount of money and we're entrusting them to make sure that as business owners and drivers of this business, we're entrusting them to help send our message at a more granular level. So we need them on board as well. And what's their satisfaction like? By building out your support system, you will then start to see the benefits of your revenue drivers, which are going to be ultimately how you get more traction, business growth. Further, we need to understand what drives vision and mission and work backwards there. So I think that's a really important thing to mention. Once you know where you want to be, it's then going, okay, how do we get back from there? If we want to be number one online retail, if we want to hit a target of 100,000 orders per month, okay, what do we need to go back to there? Okay, how do we achieve that? We need to have a larger online presence, larger marketing spend. We need to have more people on the road, visiting customers, more BDMs. It's thinking about practically what should we be doing to achieve this. And, with sales, it's always about casting the net out wide and converting back into an ultimate success. So understanding what do the numbers look like and planning that out. And a key item for me is always look internally before going external. There's a lot of things that you can work on in the business to get small wins and real good efficiencies before you go out and go, okay, let's change systems, let's rebrand, let's do a whole bunch of work. Let's figure out internally what are some things that we can improve on. And if we had the time to, set aside and work on to ultimately get the wins that we want. So this is an example of more of a framework around a business plan. So developing and implementing a business plan is really important, and it's a really hard process to do. You can't just do it. You can't just get in front of your staff and say it, but not live it. It's something that really needs to be lived and breathed throughout the organization. The business plan is ordinarily developed during workshop sessions and involves key input from stakeholders. We held one of these sessions. It was a 2-day workshop. The first day was with the two brothers which owned the business, their insurance broking business. It's really trying to get into their heads of understanding. They inherited the business, from their father. And it's really trying to get into their heads, okay, where do you want this business to be? What do you want to stand for? And, how is it going to fund the lifestyle you want outside of work, but also make work enjoyable for the next 20 years? The second session was leveraging that information and getting the sales rep in, the internal accountant in there as well, the HR team, and really getting input and opinion from them around developing a strategy. Now, during that 2-day workshop, I think the first thing we did was we sent out an alignment survey to the two owners. Two brothers worked together every day. What became apparent was they were misaligned on a couple of things. And that misalignment almost became a target as part of our business plan was, okay, we need to get alignment amongst the owners, because without that, Bob says go this way, John says go that way. Who do I listen to? We're not working together. We're not going to be able to achieve what we want to. So it's really important about getting alignment across at the first instance, the top level, and then bringing it down around the levels. Further, the business plan, it should set the tone and pace for the business for a defined period of time. Now, you might go through a really strong growth phase, and if I do this correctly, you might be down you might be coming into that growth stage. So you might be going hard. You might be, as business owners, working late nights, employing people at a pace that you've never done before. You're going to get into cash flow issues because you're growing, but that growth requires input. The business plan should define that pace and what's it going to look like for the next couple of periods. Whereas you may get into the maturity phase and things might be working really well. And as they start to look to exit, it's going, okay, what does succession look like from here? And by having that in a documented plan, you can share that with your internal stakeholders to make sure everyone's aware of what's going on. The business plan as well, our goals there, they should be achievable, but also involve a degree of growth. I call it a stretch. Have a stretch target. If it's too easy to do, you're probably going to hit it anyway. Have something there that's going to test you guys. And falling short of that target may happen, but it shouldn't be a bad thing. It's going, okay, we fell short, but we still grew tremendously from where we were. What did we need to do, and how can we do things better for the next time? And putting that into a place, and it almost becomes an ongoing development strategy for the business. This is where it gets the important part. Once it's developed, it needs to be presented to staff and lived through key management. And this is where Melbourne Football Club, they had done it a couple of times before, and I reckon Carlton's still doing it. They've probably got a plan in there, but people aren't buying into it. The board or the managers, the owners, if they're not living it, and if they're not showing everyone else in the business that they're working just as hard as them to achieve the goal, it's going to fall down. You want everyone working together as an organization to achieve this goal, because for the employee, they may go, oh, what's in it for me? I'm going to work harder. I can just get paid more elsewhere. But it's about articulating to them that, by achieving our targets, there may be bonus incentives or an increase in pay, but you're just going to have more job satisfaction. You're going to come to work more excited to be a part of something that's moving, that's exciting. If you're in a good workplace, like I know I've been in a good workplace for a long time, it makes every facet of your life more enjoyable. So that's what's in it for them. It's about articulating to them. And the better we do, the better we can remunerate, reward, and give people challenge and growth opportunities. And lastly, as mentioned, the plan needs to be visible and kept alive by all staff in the business. So a flow on of the first, but then, if you've got someone that's a mid-level employee and someone new joins, you want to make sure that they're moving to the same beat of the drum, so they can give the new employee the same experience that they've gotten from the key management, and living the company culture, making sure they're sharing the plan. This is why we do things this way. This is why we have our processes. This is why we invest in time and do this. It's for that ultimate goal, which then comes into a really neat picture on almost what a business plan cycle should look like. So it's getting input from your customers, your management, and your staff. Now, if you're not doing staff surveys or staff engagement surveys now, it's imperative that you do, because unless you know what they're feeling and what their opinions are on things, you're going to make decisions that affect them. And more times than not, if it's not articulated why those decisions are being made, it's going to make them a bit annoyed. So getting staff involvement and feedback is really important. From there, we'll also define our vision and mission. And I like to say a 5-year plan is always a good one. Putting together that 5-year strategic plan in the current environment, it's really 5 years is a long time. But then scaling back that, and I think it's kind of checkpoints, If we want to be somewhere in 5 years, where do we need to be in 3 years? If we want to be there in 3 years, where do we need to be in 12 months' time? Okay, 12 months' time, we need to be doing this. What are the things we need to be considering quarterly, monthly, and weekly? And they're the processes and the systems in your business to make sure that we're on track to ultimately hit that 5-year target. And that's where, having a large, big, hairy, audacious 5-year plan is great, because you can work towards that. It's the pie in the sky. But then scaling that back to a more tangible, functional target, goal, KPI for individuals and teams and organizations is really important. And that's where you get to your daily interactions, which all this stuff is important. It's documented. It's fun to do. You have these great big workshops, but then it's okay, scaling that back to when I go to work every day, why am I doing this? How do I act? How do I present? How do I interact with people? That's what's important, because you do these things right, then as the diagram shows, that's going to influence your customers, your managers, and your staff, which are going to have they're going to have more involvement with you, better experience, will lead to growth. So that's at a high level our framework for business planning, and how we do it is we work with people to define at the workshop level those 5-year plans, the vision and mission, but then ultimately as advisors and accountants, and I'd be remiss to talk about the financial aspect of this, where we fall into place is going, okay, this is where you need to be. We assist clients in dealing with their financial resources, which is really important, because if we need to be here and we need new equipment, okay, how are we going to finance that equipment? What effects are going to have on our cash flow? If we're in the growing stage, okay, are there taxes that we need to be aware of? And how do we forecast for that? How do we make sure we're in tune with our finances? And then, okay, how much finance or capital do we need to allocate to marketing, let's say, because we need to get our brand name out there. So that's where we can have discussions with different parts of your organization to make sure that it's ultimately, we can finance it and it's achievable, and then we can forecast out what the results look like. So in conclusion, a business plan needs to consider all parts of the business. It's an investment in the business's future success. It cannot be a set and forget. Again, it's an investment, and if you're an SME or you're a business owner, taking 2 days out of a month, a week, or a year, it's a big ask. So we want to make sure that if you do take that time out, there's something that's tangible comes out of it, and that it's then lived through the business. And that's where you'll start to see the returns. And failing to plan is planning to fail. I think it's just had to be in there. But if you're not thinking about these things and you're not documenting them, you're ultimately going to come away with either chasing the new shiny ball or not really getting the growth that you should be. And just out of that, if anyone's interested in what we do, William Buck, so again, we're just over here at our stand. Come chat to us if you want. But we hold what's called a William Buck Hour. So it's a complimentary 1 hour session where we just sit down with you and talk about your business. We'll put together, it's almost like a health check on what we can see as some, things that you should be considering. And out of that, we can put together a plan and chat further. But if you are interested in that, scan the QR code, pop your details down, or just come visit me and the team at the stand over here. Other than that, I'll stick around if anyone's got any questions, but thank you for your time.
Please put your hands together for Jeremy, King of Strategy.